Okay. So, we're not going to learn the titles over here. And again, we'll see, this was said on Sukkos, and it's based on a Sicha, the Frierdikeh Rebbe on Sukkos, and at the end there's a footnote that explains all of this connection with Sukkos. Mashal le'inyan Chasidus, ve'elu dvarav. Margolius, pninim, nimtzois bekarkois hayam. Gecholim shel pecham, or pacham, hameirim umechamemim, nimtzoim beimke adam. Now the Rebbe is going to be very exact over here with if it's in Yam, if it's in the Adama, the effect of what the Gecholim do, that they're both Meirim and Mechamemim. Vaseder hu. Yeah, a coal miner. No, coal. פחם, yeah.
מה זה פחם? יכול להיות שזה שם אחר. בעברית, מה זה פחם? זה עץ שרוף, לא? לא, מדברים על זה. מה שאתה מוצא בתוך האדמה. מוצאים בתוך האדמה של לעשות.
Why don't you Google the word coal?
No, there's different, there's things that you find inside the...
And there's things that they make, they burn the wood afterwards. Yeah, right.
Okay, so
in Pennsylvania, they have these big coal mines.
זה פחם.
Haseder hu shetzarich li is adam sheyechaven, a foreman, someone in charge. Heichen lachbar v'keitzad limtzei oisam the coals. Hapoyli micholim lismoich al chachmasei shal hamachaven of the foreman. Achaleim li shama lehoira oisav beoifen meduyak. The Rebbe is going to make a point of this later on in the Sicha. Meidach, even though in general they need to follow the directions of the foreman, but that's not enough. Ein hem yecholim biyoisam beimke adama lismoich ala avir shenoishin hamachavi. The foreman is breathing is not going to help for them. They need to breathe on their own. Kol poyel tzarich ba'atzmei lischaber leruach hachayim ala avir atzach hamotzi al pnei adama. I guess they used to have some type of way of, just like when you go under the water, he's going to talk about it, you need to have some type of air hose to be able to breathe. V'loi, if not, hu ol chashom lipo l'loi ruach chayim. V'kach gam odam atzoil al toich hamayim k'dei limtzoi es hapninim. That's another place. Where do you find pearls? Got to dive. Muchrach linshoim avim en amotzi al pnei hadam. Ad kan toichen dvorav of the Frierdikeh Rebbe. And then the Frierdikeh Rebbe concludes, "Va Rebbe siyem she'es hanimshul yachol kol echad lahavin haChasidus meira umechamemes." Again, these two expressions, kepecham or kepcham. What do you say? Avol tzarich lachter leimkei haadama levarer ulezachich v'chulol. Like we know throughout the Chassidus, the concept of birudim, you got to refine, you got to take things out. Just like when you take the coal out of the ground, you got to separate it from the earth, you got to separate it from the shmutz. You can't just, find the coal. Because you're engaging in things that are low and earthy and so on, you need to have a connection. Still need that connection when you're in the ground. Moving shekol prat b'moshel masim b'diuk l'nimshel v'tzarich lahav. The Rebbe has a few questions over here on this whole mashal or these two mashalim that the Frierdikeh Rebbe says in the Sicha. First of all, madu metzayin Rebbe mashal shnei dvarim pecham shebeimke adama upninim shebeyam v'lo yistapik b'echad mehem. One mashal would have been enough. What's the point, seemingly, of both mashalim? You need to have the air hose. So fine. What's wrong with just giving you the mashal of the air hose with dealing with the coal? You have to add about the pninim. Second thing, base. L'mroi shara b'maskal b'mashal ala pninim hamargoli is ikir harchava b'mashal hilgaba pcham v'agichol. The long part of the mashal, what does he spend a lot of time on? Talking about the coals. He mentions the pninim, but not much. V'yoser mekach benimshol mefarsh Rebbe rak es inyan apcham v'loy masker klaus amargolius u'mao esibelakach. When he talks about what does it mean in our life, so he doesn't even explain the margolius in our life, the pninim in our life. What does it mean diving in our life? He talks about imke adama. He talks about you have to be mevarer, you have to be mezachach. That he talks about in the nimshul. He doesn't talk about the other thing. So if both mishalim are important, so explain both mishalim. They're not both important to such a degree that you don't even explain it. So just to bring one mashal. Doch b'yoser loymar shekivim sharebe mesayim shetal nimshul yochel kol echad lahavin. He realized, I just told you, you could all understand. So I don't have to explain everything to you. Usamach al kach shemashal apninim yuvan al kol protav me'atzmai. So he says, Sharis inyan apcham hu b'kol zeis mazber b'nimshul. When it comes to the coals, he didn't rely on us and saying, you'll understand it. Ve'ein asoymach shadvarim yuvan me'aleim. Umekach muvan shebeikar chashav ladas she'inyan shel Chasidus u'kimshal apachim. This is going to be the point that the Rebbe is going to bring out later on the Sicha. That as in the Frierdikeh Rebbe Sicha, the main inyan that we need to understand about is the coals. Not so much about the pearls. Gimel. Kol inyan amuva b'toyra hu meduyik l'chalutin. Tzarech eifel loymer sha'akesher she'en p'cham la'adama v'she'en pninim liyam einenu rak ne'shezem me'koymam begashmias. Elam neish yesh kesher pnimi b'mehusam. There's the pninim have to do with yam. Whatever yam is beruchnis. And gecholim have to do with adama, whatever that's beruchnis. But tzarech lahavin ma'u ha'kesher ha'mehusi she'ben p'cham la'adama v'she'en pninim liyam. So first of all, now the Rebbe is going to go establish for us, al pi Chasidus, what is the concept, what's the spiritual idea, what's the ruchnius of yam and adam. So just a nekuda that we know throughout Chasidus, there's an idea called alma diskasya and alma disgalia. Alma diskasya is where all the nevroim, all the creations are aware of godliness. We're talking about higher spiritual worlds. They're not separated from Elikus. They feel that their life force is Elikus. Just like creatures in the sea, dogim shebayam, that they realize miyad sheparshim mayam mason, that this is their life. Their life is the sea. As opposed to Alma Disgali, the revealed world, that's just like people living on the ground. You don't have to be tied to the ground, even though we get our chayes from the ground. We don't have to be tied to the ground to exist. We don't see it fully connected to us. The same thing, Alma Disgalia, the revealed worlds of Elikus, in other words, where Elikus allows the world to be revealed as something separate, that is a level where there's Elikus, there's God, there's godliness, and then there's me. This is Yam and Adama in Ruchnis. Let's see it inside. Gimel. Ha'hevdel shebein Adama liyam musber misber mekaymes. We're moving al pi ha'hevdel shebein abruim shal pnei Adama lebein abruim shebeyam. Harei ha'koil hoya min ha'afar. It says in Kehelis, everything came out of the earth. We have this right away in the beginning of Chumash Bereshis. It says, Toitzei ha'aretz. All creations came from the earth. Not just growing things, but even animals came out of the earth. Adam himself was made from the earth. Hakoil nivra min ha'aretz. That's one nakud. Another point is, even after we were created, now the only things that come from the earth are vegetation, growing things. People, animals, they don't come from the earth anymore. But even though they don't come from the earth, they're still dependent on the earth. V'nivroim mekablim es chayusam min ha'aretz, eretz umenu yetzel lechem. Lamrois zois, even though we have this strong connection with the earth, hakesher v'yischablu shebein nivroim lebein ha'adama, einenu nire la'achar shenivru. Because you look at a person, you look at an animal, and you say, it doesn't have to be on the earth. It could be somewhere else. It could be on the top floor of the Chrysler building like we spoke about yesterday. L'umazais, habruim shebeyam, hadogim, kishem pershim and ayam yadem mesim, hem muchrachim li'motzei b'mkor chayusam. L'chein namar, Chassidus speaks about, sheyam, humoshul la'oilemes shebehem hakoyach ha'aleki, hamahave mechayu mekayim oisam, Meir begoli. Kach shanivroim choshim betzorcham hatmidi liyes kshurim lemkor chayusam kedei loy la'abdes kayumam. Just like fish know, and they realize that if they leave the sea, they'll stop living. Ulefichach nikroim ha'oilmas almin stimin. Those worlds are called concealed. Ki mitziyusam ha'atzmi shal ha'oilmas mechusa aydei ha'makir shalhem. The worlds themselves are covered over by the likus that gives them chayis. They're surrounded by the likus that gives them chayis. Kedogim shabiyam. L'umma zois eretz hi mashal la'oilmas shebehem ein hanivroim choshim b'koyach ha'laki sheboiram ve'einam margishim es ha'kesher l'mkor chayusam. L'chein hem nikroim almin de isgalyon mitziyusam ha'atzmis giluya. It's like there's something separate. They're revealed outside of Elikus. Hem choshim atzmam kimetzias nefredes. Zu tamtzis ha'hezber l'shnei advarim shebemashal pcham sheba'adama u'pnim shebayam. Yam and Adama and the mashal are going on alma diskasya, alma disgalia. Hashpa hachsidus ala nefesh ha'odam nechlekes ba'oifen kloli l'shnayim. Aleph begalia sheba'odam b'chinas adama sheboi. Beis besosim sheba adam b'chinas yam sheboy, as the Maimer, as the Rebbe will go on to explain. So, in Ois Dalet, he finally gets to the topic that we mentioned before. What is the reason that nowadays is the time for learning Chasidus? What changed that 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, by Matan Torah, they didn't have to learn Chassidus. And there's two things that are different now. Is this generation worthy? In other words, like many people say, if in previous generations it's hidden, so how much more so now? We are definitely unworthy of it. So why is it now becoming revealed? There must be something overriding that even though we are unworthy, still and all, or dafke because of that is why Chasidus was revealed. Umehem. Aleph, kekol chagolus machshicha yoiser, nidresh ernayle yoiser kidei lizgaber ala choshech. Simply, if you have a little bit darkness, so a little bit light's enough. If you have a very powerful darkness, like the Rebbe always used the term, choshech kafel mechupel, for a choshech kafel mechupel, you need to have a very strong light. L'chein is galsa nishmas ha'toira, she'im oireres u'megale es ha'koiches ha'amukim yoiser ha'chevuyim shal neshama sosim de nishmas. Just like we know that we said before, there's the yam and there is the adam. There is the almin stimin and almin disgalion. In the person, the almin disgalion, or the revealed part of his personage, is the body. What's the sasim of the person? What's the concealed part? That's the neshama. The Torah, the halacha of the Torah, is telling me what to do with my guf. What I should do with my hands, what I should do with my mouth, what I should do with my head, what I should do with my feet, and what I shouldn't do with them. So the nigla part of the Torah is speaking to the nigla part of the yid, the body. That's why the nigla part of the Torah is called gufa de'oraisa, the body of the Torah. Pnimius ha-Torah, or nishmasa de'oraisa, the neshama of the Torah, directs itself to the neshama that's within me. By directing itself to the neshama that's in me, it reveals and opens up and gives me the power and capability to overcome the great darkness that we're now in Golus. This is also the idea, we mentioned this also about Tanya revealing the hasten Shem Neshama, that it's the strength and the inner part of the Neshama becomes revealed through learning Chasidus. That is one reason why Dafkin now we're supposed to learn Chasidus. Beis. It's not just time we're waiting. The Rebbe's approach is we need to prepare. You don't just go into the Geulah. You don't just wait for it to happen. We need to prepare for the Geulah. We had that lashon already in previous occasions. When you prepare for something, you need to do it, something that has to do with it. And I'll repeat the word, I mentioned this already before. The Rebbe once asked someone by Chassidus, what do you do before my Fabrengens? So he said, I lay down a little bit, I take a nap, so I should be able to, my mind should be able to be clear by the Fabrengen. You're talking about love of Kabachim, you're talking about Balbatim, they're busy working all day, who knows what time to get up in the morning, they want to have a clear mind by the Fabrengen, it's a fair enough thing. So the Rebbe answered him, Schlafen is achon av schlafen. Chasidus is achon av Chasidus. Sleeping is a preparation for sleeping, and Chasidus is preparation for Chasidus. The same thing. Yeah, the achon for loss of love, the preparation for Mashiach's times has to be similar to what's going to be in Mashiach's times. Nitna melmayla me'ein v'te'ima min agilu sheyil asad love. Bedoimel enamer bekisve arizal umuval alocha v'magn Avram b'shulchan ad morazakin ba'al Geulah v'asimcha shebe'erev Shabbos sarich litoy machole Shabbos, like it says te'amel chaim zachol. So therefore, min hashamayim, they allowed us, they gave us to be able to taste from the Geulah's time, from the Geulah's food, from the Pnimius HaTorah. It's going to become revealed then, so we have Chasidus revealed now. What does it make a difference? In previous Sichos, again, we spoke about these two approaches. But what does it make a difference? For which reason we'll learn Chasidus? If I learn Chasidus for this reason, if I learn Chasidus for that reason, l'may nafkamina. The Gemara a lot of times asks that. L'may nafkamina, when there's my benayu. The Gemara says two different reasons for a certain halacha. My benayu, if you say the reason for the halacha is like this, or you say the reason for the halacha is like that. What's it make a difference if the reason we're learning Chasidus is because of to strengthen our neshama to deal with the darkness of Golus, or to prepare us for the Pnimius HaTorah that's going to become revealed when Mashiach comes? Echad havdelim ben shnei hasberim halaluhum lefi hatam harishon shechsidus ba keneged choshech hagolus kosher ha'inyan lekoiches hagluyim sheba adam. Meaning, that aspect of our neshama that's dealing with darkness. The revealed parts of the neshama is what's being challenged by the darkness, and it's what needs the strength of Chasidus. Hanilchamim begolus, v'koivshim es gufay, v'nafshe bahamis, v'schalke ba'olam, asher b'emtsoyes ha-Chasidus nitten lahem koyach v'toikiv, mipnimius v'sosam ha-neshama, k'dei la'afsher lisgaber al choshech ha'olam, v'afilu al ha-choshech kafel ha-mechupel shebedoris ha'achroinim. So that's only the part of the neshama that's actually dealing with and challenged and engaging with the world needs that special extra vitamin of Chasidus to be able to deal with it. It's not out to fight. It's not out to engage with the darkness. It's davar nasa memela. It's going to happen automatically, but that's not the purpose. Ella kidei lis achadim malakus. That is the purpose of learning Chasidus, if it in the reason that it's there to prepare for Mashiach. Ki yedua shalasid lavei loitis patzei avoida shalavar birudim. Why? What does birudim mean? Birudim means you have a spark of kedusha, you have a nitzot kedusha, trapped in klippa, trapped in a davar gashmi. So you need to be mavarer berurim, you need to elevate those sparks from the klippa that's surrounding it. But Mashiach's times there's no elevation of sparks from klippa because there's no klippa. Ki yasroch hatumah from haaretz. Ella tisbatzana rak aliyos mechayel al choyel b'kedusha atzma. What's going to be when Mashiach comes? We're going to go up higher and higher in kedusha. That's going to be Mashiach's times avodah. So similar to Mashiach's times avodah, which is about going higher and higher in kedusha, learning Chasidus now, according to this second idea of preparing for Mashiach's times, is not about dealing with the darkness, but it's about connecting greater and stronger with the Eibishter. Not that the sosam of the neshama should give koiches to the revealed part of the neshama to be able to handle the world, but the very connection of the concealed part of the neshama itself. So So he says like this: V'kiven she'inyan radishin ha'is gabra shal choshech hu hechrich muchlat ba'avodas adam l'kaydai kedivrik v'yus meir chami admur b'sicha now that he said kedei loy lipel chas v'sholem loy roch chayim chas v'sholem a person shouldn't die, so he needs to have l'chein mushva inyan zeh shebachsidus l'gecholis shal pecham ha'meirim ha'machamim tzrichim tarchim chiyunim b'chay adam k'lalon. Light and warmth, it would have been so much more geschmack if we learned it in Yiddish. Lichtigkeit and Warmkeit is the lashon of the Frierdikeh Rebbe, and the Rebbe repeats it again and again. Lichtigkeit and Warmkeit, these are basic necessities. And he's going to explain, on the other hand, pearls are not basic necessities. A person can live a whole life without pearls. Even the wives. It's a luxury, it's not a necessity. But light, you can't survive without light. And definitely you can't survive without warmth.
But what's the pshat? The feet time of Rishon, the Chassidus book, and like Chesha, Koshim Kechsa Giluyim Shabbat. Why Kechsa Giluyim?
Because the Koiches HaGiluyim are the Koiches that are engaging with the world. The Koiches Hastum steht hecher von Welt. It's beyond the world. It's not challenged by the world. Yechidish of a nefesh is challenged by the world. It has no shaykhs with the world. The things that are being challenged is Seichel de Kedusha has connected that Seichel de Klippe. Chesed, Avad de Kedusha has connected that Taivus and so on. Then he says, L'umazois, bottom of the page 192, B'hashpos Chasidus besasim de nishmas b'fnei atzma mushvas b'pnimin. כי בזמן הגולus אין זה כל כך עניין של הכרח, אלא דבר המייפס האדם כפנינים. It's an adornment. It's just, like jewelry, it's made to make the person look nice. וזוהי הסיבה לכך שעיקר הרחבה בשיחה ובעניין הפחם, ולא בעניין הפנינים. כי עניין זה בחסידס, that's why the Frierdikeh Rebbe spoke at length about the coals, because that was crucial, that was necessary, that's a survival thing. The other aspect of Chassidus, the aspect of Chassidus that's prepare us for Mashiach's times, that, at least then, the way the Rebbe is going to explain it, was not so crucial, not so vital. What's crucial, what's vital, is to be able to deal with the darkness. There's a darkness around us. We need to be able to handle it. You must have Chassidus for that. So the Frierdikeh Rebbe spent more time in analyzing and describing the mashal about the coals, which has to do with something that's crucial and vital, over talking about the pearls. So he says in Hey, Hezbra mefuret lakachu, be'inyan hapcham mitzayin harebbe shnei pratim. No? What did we say? You remember the Yiddish? Where it's a pop quiz. Ze machen lichtig und warm. Hameirim und mechamemim. She'atzad ha'shaveh shebeneim hu choim warmkeit shumare al chayus ve'oir einam moisifim teisefes chadosha al adover atzmai. אלהם גורמים לכך שהדבר עצמו הקיים לפניכם בשלמוסוי יחם חי ומאיר. In other words, like this, you could look at a body of a person and a live body, and Rahman al-Islam, a body that just the life just left it, doesn't look any different. But it's a totally different thing if it's alive or not alive. The same thing, light. Everything in the room is the same, whether the light is on or not on. So what's happening with lichtigkeit and warmkeit? What's happening with light and warmth? They're not adding anything. It's just the very thing itself is in a different state. Ubedoy melakach teres Chassidus. Chassidus eino meisifa chashom shum pratim chadoshim l'toira. B'toira lo yitochen shum shinu giroyin oy toisus. Gam lifnei gilui teres Chassidus kuimu kol tariyagam mitzvah b'shleimus. Elo shoyotzoyrech kashara oilam nase karir yoyser. Choshech yoyser v'ad l'koir v'choshech g'doylam b'yoyser b'gilui shal chayus v'choyim V'oir b'asiyazu. You have to have Warmkeit und Lichtigkeit. You had to bring that into the mitzvah. It's the same tefillin you put on before, 1,000 years ago. But now, because of the darkness, because of the cold, you need to make the tefillin alive. You need to make the Torah alive. You need to make it lit up. You need to make it a lichtige learning, a lichtige tefillin, a lichtige Shabbos, which maybe 1,000 years it was there automatically, but now it's missing that. The Rechagav in footnote 21, he mentions that famous letter that's the introduction to Rayom Yom. And in that letter, the Rebbe Rashab mentions, if you learned it over there in Rayom, Hayom Hazeh nitan lanu or v'chayis nafsheinu. This day of Yutis Kislev, the Rosh Hashanah Chasidus, was given to us, and he used these two expressions, the light and the life of our life. So he used the same term, Lichtigkeit and Warmkeit, the same concept. V'zoi hatshuva l'sheilosam shel achodim, and we mentioned this on a previous occasion. Ma'isa v'seinu b'yadeinu. V'saboy shel hashoyel histader lifnei his galus ha-Baal Shem Tov v'Torah Chasidus belodoy zois. Before the Baal Shem Tov came around, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, didn't need Chasidus. El shehu atzmi ideya sha'itzel saboy hoya cham umor harbe yoyzlein aroich. Sie gewen warmer, sie gewen lichtiger bei sein Seiden. Vakach bechol doida. It wasn't just his own Zayda, that whole generation was warmer. That whole generation was brighter. Like we said before, you yourself are saying, is then our generation worthy of this? And then he says, I mentioned this also, Hadavar doime la'adam shemachlit kivin shebet kupvas tamas. Einu tzarech la'askas atam, or when it's hot in the summer, ve'einu tzarech lizgeres adelos v'achaloinis hapsuchim klape chutz, because it's nice weather. Leficha chuyina kach tamid gam bet kupvas tevis. Doesn't make any sense. The same thing. Then, by his Zayda, by his Alter Zayda, it was light, it was warm. You didn't need the light and the warmth of Chasidus. Now, it's dark outside. Now it's cold outside. So you need to warm up. So you need to have the light. Chasidus ichnisa chayis v'oir l'chol in yonah Torah ha'mitzvos. Be'emtzois gilui pnimius nishmasei shal Yehudi. V'achas ha'adgoshes ha'ikrias shal Torah Chasidus she'avodas Hashem muchrachas le'osois b'chayus u'b'simcha. U'mitzad sheni he madgisha es asakana shebehadora, if you're lacking chayis, lacking simcha, vafilu b'achlashusa shel chayizu, even if it's a little bit weaker. Sakana shel kridas v'adishas achas shalom shezel simmer lahepach hachayim rachman letzlan. The Rebbe says, Pashut, how do you tell the difference between, like we said before, a living body, a chas shalom, a body that's not alive? The temperature, you see if it's cold or not. Achayis v'avoyis Hashem yechol liyis meduda behesem l'tivoi shel ha'adam. Kishem shel l'chol bal chaim yesh chayis v'yesh af bal chaim shechoimam gavoya yoysim shel adam. They're more heated, they're hotter than we are. This 96.8 or 98.7 or whatever, now they've said it's not exactly 98.7, you can be as low as 96 point something, it can be as high as something else, but that's not necessarily the same temperature of animals. There could be animals that their heat is more than people. Whatever the heat is that's a sign of his life, is according to his nature. If he's an animal that has a high heat, high temperature, so that's his heat. A human being, his heat is 96 or 97 or 98. That's by a normal human being, that's by an animal for sure. The Rebbe is going to make over here a slight distinction between the two expressions, warm and lichtig. Warmth is showing on the natural teva that a person has to be a certain temperature. Light is something beyond the person. And actually there's a Sicha where the Rebbe speaks about this at great length, the difference in Chelik Beis, where he talks about the difference in, talking about that letter of the Rebbe Rashab, the difference between Oir and Chayis Nafsheinu Nitten Lanu, one is more Pnimi, one is more Makif. He's saying a similar thing over here. What does it mean? What does light help us do? Light helps us to see. When we see something, especially when we see something with our mind's eye, we understand something, we are able to reach for higher things. An animal doesn't have seichel, doesn't have the idea of riyah, doesn't have the true idea of light. So therefore, all the animal knows is what's in their world. There's a Chassidus word they used to say by Fabrengen that a goat never is able to look up to Shemayim because of the way his body is. But if he were and he'd see the moon, he'd think it's cheese, because that's the way the goat thinks. The light is going here also on the light of Seichel, and that allows a person to reach for something that's higher than his nature. So that's the difference that Rebbe now points out between Chayis, which has to do with Varmkeit, and light, which is beyond nature. Lirois beine sichloi hachacham einav beroishoi, which means, the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, brings down from the Zohar, Ba'ahu de shari al reishe b'misha shoyre al roishoi. The chacham notices and realizes the shechina that's upon his head. He looks beyond himself. Not what he's interested in. He sees the ideal. He sees what to go for. That's the light. That's Likutei. Not oil, just chayis. Like the Alter Rebbe explains that in Perek Vav and Tanya. The Alter Rebbe says to be considered loy avodai, bringing from the Gemara, it's only someone that learns shoyne pirkei mea pamim v'achas, 101 times. Why? Because the derech in those days was to learn everything over 100 times, because it wasn't written down, so you had to memorize it. So that was normal. That was the teva. That was the regilus. Comes the person that goes 101 times and he broke his nature. That's called avodah. But the other person learned 100 times. He learned 100 times and it's called lo avodah. So we see that a person that's like stuck in his nature, however good his nature is, however holy his nature is, but he's stuck in his nature, that's not avodah yet. Hechreches avoida shal b'chol meidecha asiya ma'al lemedidus u'melgbolus hativya shal ha'adam davar hamisafsher ayidei kach shemeir. When you have a light shine upon you, so then you could reach out of your boundaries, out of your limitations. Kivin sheshnei inyanim shal chayim va'oir hem inyanim pnimiyim ba'avodas ha'torah va'mitzvos. L'chein, now the Rebbe is going to bring another point. What did the Frierdikeh Rebbe say? Except for the Ruach Chaim, he said, which the Rebbe made a big point before, you need to have the air pumped in over there. But he said another thing, there's a foreman. A foreman in charge. And who are they? The Rebbe explains. Yachad im nesinas koyach lekach. Keitzad lischamem ulahoyres atzmeinu v'sivusenu. So two things. They show us, and they also give us the power to do it. They don't just show us and say, okay, now figure out where you're going to get the koyches for it. They give us the koyches for it also. V'apoyalim yicholim lismech al chachmasei shal hamachaven achaleim lishama loyroisav ba'oifim meduyek, like we said before. Got to follow exactly. And then, The Rebbe is going to say, along with following the Rebbe exactly, you can't just go ahead and say, okay, tell me what to do. We'll soon see. No. It's not that simple. The Rebbe doesn't want robots. Al kach moisav aroi Rebbe oid inim b'sichosoi me'idach einem yecholim lismech ala avir shenoishim ha'machaven kol poil ba'atzmi tzarech lischaber leruach ha'chaim. Nit on lachshoy shekiven shemistamchin al chachmas ha'madrich v'tzarech lisham aloi b'diuk dai b'shmaser so. So the Rebbe says, kifi shetom pa'am mishum she'achtivu loi b'diuk ma'ala lasos. Give me a shopping list. You tell your wife, you want me to go to the store. Tell me what you want. Just give me an exact shopping list. So the person wrote that to the Rebbe. Tell me exactly what you want me to do. There's something Chassidus talks about. There's Mesiris Haratzen. That's the true idea of Mesiris Nefesh. Nefesh has to do with Ratzen. Mesiris Nefesh means you give over your will. So this Chassid says, I give over my will totally to you, to the Rebbe. But what about your brain? You didn't give that over to anybody. You didn't go over your heart to anybody. The Rebbe wants that you should use your brain for him. Use your brain? No. The whole person has to be there. Im Chabad, which is Seichel, Chagas, Midas, V'nehi, Natzchai Yisoid goes on action, Asiyah. Ella, Shes HaShleimas Azoi Tzarech Lirtoim, Lebitzua, Retzoinam Shalech, Lishama Loira, Oisav Be'oifen Meduyek. So on the one hand, I use my Seichel, and I use my Midas, and I use my actions, but I realize it's all following the exact directives of the Rebbe. Zoi mashmois divra Rebbe b'sichosoi shalagabe ha'aver shekol echad tzarech linshoim ein hu yochol lismech ala madrich shaloi kishita shal tzadik b'munosoi yichaya, as we soon can explain, al tikra yichya ala yichaya shemestamchin ala tzadik shuhu yichaya sa'acherim ala kol echad tzarech liyas ba'atzmei mechuber leruach ha'chaim. And then the Rebbe is not happy. The Rebbe is going to, like I said, he's going to bring this home. B'milim pshutis. What does this mean? How do I connect, and how do I use my seichel and my midas and make sure that's in line with the Rebbe? Yesh hechrech bekvias itim b'chol yoyim v'yoyim l'lim Chasidus. And then the Rebbe says it's not just enough to learn, v'loy limit shitchi, not just to be superficial. Alalamel mamish k'dei lav Chasidus v'cholu. The person should feel that he has to work on it. And then the Rebbe says further, and the Rebbe is going to say, why? Ki be'inyan shel chaim like yitachin afsaka. And then the Rebbe, like, again, that's what I'm saying, it's like a fabrengen. He's like bringing it home. He's not going to let go of this. Kishem sha'adavar b'chaim kipshutam im yitan adam shu roitza lichyos b'yom rishon or b'yom shlishi. Sunday and Tuesday I'll be alive. Not Monday. I will be neim b'yom sheni hu roitza l'noach mechayev. Move on, sha'ad liyechas shalom yom shlishi. If a person's not alive on Monday, it's not. Va'ikar al adam liskar sha'akavani hi lepoil mamish v'achan lagabav mamish. Again, in Yiddish there's so much geschmacker. It says, und take meint man. Meint take We're talking about the person himself. Shalo yishor k'fi shaya esmoel al k'fi shakam ayoyim ba'boiker v'echziru les neshama mechadosh chadoshim lebkarim kach u'tzadich lechadish es ha'kesher im haruach chaim. The Rebbe says in footnote 35, this is even more important because the Chazal say, Yitzrei shel Adam misgaber olav b'chol yom. If my Yetzer Hara was like a once a week visitor, or once a month, or once a year visitor, kind of, okay, I learned Chasidus once a month, once a week. But the Yetzer Hara is there every single day, so I need to counter him every single day as well. I dekvias b'limud Chasidus b'cheishik mechudish kemish lalamad miyamav. with the same geschmack as if we never learned. ובאמצע זויס תסבצע עבודתו במשך כל היום בחמימוס ובאור קרוי. So now the Rebbe is more or less, he explained what the idea of the coals is about. Now he's going to explain how coals is not everything. Kol zoina pcham shebechsidus hakosher la'adama galya sheba'adam amnam ha'pcham matzui be'imke ha'adama davar ha'moid al pnimius ha'adam. Like we said before, it's the sasim of the neshama, the inner part of the neshama. Ach bechol zeis medubar be'imke ha'adama. It's still the adama that we said before. It's the revealed world. It's almadiz galyan. It's where elikus and the person is not necessarily one. L'chein avoida zu meinas min ein avoida zu. I'm sorry. Meinas min ha'adam ha'oived tchusha shel yosei mitzias atzmois. A person could still feel himself independent because that's what we say. The bruim should be abosha. Feel independent. I come from the earth. I get my chayes from the earth. But there's me and there's the earth. There's me and there's alikus. Amna moivd Hashem achayes Geulah. V'yoyser mekach. Hu meshane v'hoifech es tivui v'aragelav me'ever l'migblois. Like we said before, that's the idea of light. That's lichtigkeit. Ach la'acher kol zois hu yesh misha'oyev that Chassidus speaks about, that there's somebody, there's a Metzius that loves Hashem. Metziusoi ha'atzmisi bizgalus hu amal be'islavas avoyz Hashem. Adli islavish me'ever l'agbolus. So that's still not the ultimate. Earlier he brought down in the Ha'ara also that there's tzaddikim that they are called nun neyam, fish of the sea, because by them the avodah is take, that type of avodah where they feel themselves like they're kamayim le'amachasim, they're covered by the waters of Alakus, they feel themselves as being completely absorbed in godliness. שהיהודי יהיה כולו מחוסה ושקוע עד מעל לראשו במקור חיוסו בלכוס עד אשר הוא לא יהיה מציאס עצמויס. לקח מגיעים באמצעות לימוד פנימיוס התורה, המעיונס שבתורה, ששם אלוקוס גלויה, כמוסבר במספר מקיימס, שבניגלה שבתורה יתכן. If a person is learning Gemara, for example, it's possible that Chas v'Sholem he could forget that he's learning the Eibishter's Torah. They didn't make a bracha on Torah beforehand, meaning they didn't recognize that there's a noise in the Torah. I'm learning about Shnai Moichs and Betalis. Who's saying this? There's some meeting, let's say, in the you go sometimes by Polish Chassidim, they'll say, Zok the Heilige Gemara, Zok the Heilige Abaye V'Rava, but you won't necessarily find this by literature. Birchas nois na Torah, they forget, they didn't bench the nois na Torah, lam rois shakeyamas chavivas na Torah, they can love Torah, but they forget about what the Torah is about. Shoichim es birchas nois na Torah chas v'shalom, lo mazois, bepnimius ha Torah, murgeshes halakus. And therefore, when I learn Chasidus, I'm talking about the Eibishter, I'm talking about Neshama, I'm talking about Ruchnis. Then the Rebbe says, but there's no guarantees. I'm always a free agent. I can always do what I want to do. Lamrois she'eit mispatel sabchira v'lachein efshel legaris chas v'shalom asay yitzahara v'lilmei des pnimis ha-Torah b'oifem bilti ratzi. That's possible as well, even though in the inner part of the Torah we have revealed elikus openly. V'ayidei limud Chasidus b'shufi, that means a lot. Nasim mechusim legamri ushruyim, as in being soaked, veiken zich belakus. Me'ein mashiyah la'asid lavei, kasher mal la'aretz de'as Hashem, kamayim liyam machasim. Totally absorbed in it. V'kiven she'ein ze inyan shel asiyah b'poil, kefi she'moitzim b'doim l'kach gam b'nigl b'toira, shel limud ha-Torah hu ba'oifen shel yagdol Torah v'yadir, l'loi hevdol ma'isa b'poil, limud shu rak droish v'kabel schar. There's two ways of learning Torah. One way of learning Torah is you're learning Torah to be able to know asam ma'isa shayasam, to know the halacha. That's one level of learning Torah. Then there's a level of learning Torah. You're learning it beyond and above anything you need to know for halacha. Anything that you're ever going to use for halacha, it could be hilchos l'mashiach, things that are not negeya now, etc. That's called drosh v'kabel schar, lahagel Torah la'adira. Same thing in the two types of Chassidus. Learning Chasidus to be able to conquer the darkness, that's like learning the nigla of Torah because you want to know what to do. But here you have a different problem you have to deal with. And then there's learning Chasidus just to be completely absorbed in Olkos. Bedugma what's going to be Mashiach comes. That's like learning Torah just for Torah's sake, not because you need to know the halacha. Lefichach mushva inyan zeh lemargolius. This level of learning Torah is like pearls. She'einon chiyunis lechalutin, like we said before. They're not a necessity. V'adam yochel lichis b'adayim. Okay. So we explained up till now, based on understanding the coals versus the pearls, why the Frierdikeh Rebbe put such an emphasis on the coals, and he didn't speak that much about the pearls. But now the Rebbe is going to bring it home and say, but nowadays we need to emphasize the pearls. Kol amar le'el she'efshel yistader b'li pninim amar rak asher adam nishar b'dal damoisav. Ach kasher tzarich lisyatzav l'fnei hamelech v'loi kasher hamelech basada, that when the king is in the field, so whatever way you're dressed and however you're going about your stuff, you can go about. You don't have to dress up. If you're presenting yourself in the royal palace, cheder l'fnei cheder. It's not just enough to have clothes that are not torn. That's number one. Or even to have clothes that a rich person would wear. If not, and the Rebbe says in the footnote that this is similar to a Kohen Gadol. That if he goes in and does the avodah without all the shmeina begodim, so then this is considered avodah psula. He's not doing the way he's supposed to be. The same thing, when we have to stand before the king, we need to make sure not just that we have nice clothes and clean clothes or rich clothes, we have to have even luxuries. Just for its own sake, not to conquer the darkness, but just to absorb yourself and to know the Eibishter. Why? Because they weren't so close to Mashiach. It's not a Sicha from the nuns. Remember, the Rebbe said this in Fabrengen Tafshin Chaf Aleph, 1960. Hine ba Mashiach, shebiyosei keit sam lachayshach, umaschila hagula amitis v'ashleima, shehi kemusber b'misber m'koymes, hanisuyin shal Kadosh Baruch Hu im Am Yisrael, kaviyachim. That we say Matan Torah was the Kiddushin, the first part of the marriage. The final part of the marriage, the Nisuyim, is going to be when Mashiach comes. She is Gala, she is Yisrael, v'Kadosh Baruch Hu, heim davar echad, v'hoyu l'basar echad, like it says, the purpose of Nisuyim is to be l'basar echad. Yisrael u'malka b'chidoi, that the Yidden will be alone with the king. Haritzarech l'yiskoyin l'kach karoi. Yesh tzorech b'pninim, she'iton yelchu al achupa im melech malchem lachem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Muchrachim lilmet Chasidus, and not just to learn, but ubeshufi, like we said before, to completely immerse ourselves, to completely drown ourselves in the waters of Chasidus. V'zoi atshuva gam le'elu ha'toyanim, amnam Chasidus hidavar toiv, v'af mushva l'margolius, ach einu lo d'achar margolius. I'm fine. I'm a very simple person. I'm okay with wearing simple clothes, and I'm okay with having simple clothes, beruchnias. Adam zeh daile bekach shelavushav. What's lavushim al Chasidus? Machshava, dibur, ma'aser shetayag mitzatoira. You mushlamim v'yesh le'af tachshitim. Al pninim ein chaseres loy. So, don't bother me. Las mitzeru. So the Rebbe says, Sarach Eifel Edas. Shebenois Lakach Shazoy Allah B'Shulchan Aruch. Shechayva Lilmei Des Pnimis HaTorah Ves Kol Chelkei HaTorah. And I mentioned this before, that the Alter Rebbe says, brings down that a person that didn't learn all parts of the Torah, Chashom the Neshama has to come down again, the Gilgul, to learn those parts that he missed. V'yoyser Makach. Eikev HaChoshech Shlikstem and Sicha, like we said earlier, Hechreichi Limud Chasidus, not just for the jewelry, not just for the luxury, but for basic necessities. You need it for lichtigkeit and warmkeit, which is necessary to be alive. To say, I'm not looking for luxuries. He's going to marry the Eibishter. He doesn't care if he's not wearing jewelry. You're getting married. You got to dress the part. You can't just come in with a nice shirt to your wedding. Nemar bezoyer shebezman Golus Yisrael him kekala hanimtza b'shuka de bursaki, in a tanner's marketplace where it's disgusting and it smells from all the working of the hides of animals. She'ekev avose agdoil shalachos nakadosh baruch hu l'kalosoi u'moichel al areach ra shal shuka de bursaki agolus v'hoylach lamakim shesham nimtzas hakala Yisrael. So he says, so therefore you're going to say, so I don't need anything fancy. He says, no. Kol zois betkufas hagolus. Ata yigi azman sheboi tzarech liyis daloi golus halo hagolus, or der ois golus, the Rebbe says in Yiddish. Oid bi yoisam b'mitzrayim harei lechol b'nei Yisrael oir b'mishvoisam. V'tzarech liyis muchanim legula mitzvah shleima. V'keitzad yitachem loima shemiskoyin lechupa b'levushim you go around with clothes that belong in a tanner market. Hafatzas limud Chasidus ba'olam kamayim le'amachasim mezarzim u'memayrim es hasimcha ha'gdoila shal nisuyim shal am Yisrael ma'kadosh baruch hu v'yiru bein ebasur l'matam asarat tfachim she Yisrael v'kutshabrichu kol echad Yisrael u'malta b'chadoy v'mheru v'meinu mamish. And that the Rebbe says in the footnote that this Sicha was said on Sichos. It was also based on a Sicha that the Frierdikeh Rebbe said on Sichos, because a sukkah is likened to a chuppah. And we're talking here about the importance that when you go to a chuppah, you got to be dressed apart, you got to have the luxuries, you got to have all the beautiful and luxurious clothes, which that's what learning Chasidus is about.